Hey friends, it has been a wild month and a half, and I did not have any chance in the month of July to make any art videos, which was a huge bummer for me. But I'm back here working in my altered book, which is an old textbook called Helpful Microorganisms. And this project is based on a visualization that I did in therapy a few weeks ago. I was visualizing sort of the inner turmoil, as it were, which to me looked like basically an earthenware jug or bottle, like something out of ancient Rome. It was very organic looking and asymmetrical, and it was filled with smoke that was roiling around in there. And that image was so vivid in my mind that I had to come back and work it into a piece of art. And in addition to my usual suspects for mixed media, like these early layers collaged with pattern paper and patterned envelopes, I'm also going to be using a new-ish to me medium later on in the video. So here comes my new tool. Just discovered these back in June, and I've been playing with them a lot lately. These are tempera sticks or paint sticks, depending on where you find them. Functionally across brands, and I own several of the brands, they're basically the same kind of thing. They're tempera paint in a glue stick size plastic case that you push up just like a glue stick by turning the base of it, and they dry down to a flat surface that doesn't move after that, which is the nice part. It makes them great for sketchbooks. Many of the colors don't even move if you come back over them with water. Some of them do, not all of them. And some of them dry at a different sheen, I guess, and not all of them do that either. So they vary, not so much from brand to brand, but definitely from color to color. You get different levels of intensity and sheerness, and even sometimes some oxidizing in them. So they're a lot of fun to play with, not too expensive. They can do most of the things that I like to do with acrylics in mixed media. They do not blend or smudge. If you try to smudge them with a finger, you'll actually work them off the paper for the most part. And they're no mess, no stress, and I've really been enjoying them. I have in my personal palette of these actually 2 white paint sticks from 2 different brands, because there's a difference in the sheerness of them, and the more sheer, more transparent white is one that I use for blending or really light suggestions. And the opaque one is one that I use more for definition. As you can see here, I'm using them kind of interchangeably, but the one that isn't quite standing out so starkly on that gray smoke is the sheer white. And they're not precision tools, as you might be able to tell. They're really made, 1, for kids, and 2, they're made for covering large surface areas in a short amount of time. In fact, I brought these with me when I went to St. Louis for the St. Louis Pen Show back in June, and they came in handy because over by the journaling social area, that was where a lot of young families stopped and sat down, just in that kind of corner of the show floor. And sometimes those kids got bored, and I was like, hey, do you want to use these paint sticks? I've got this big pad of paper right here, because I had been making signs for the journaling corner. And so they were a big hit with a couple of families. But here you can see I'm coming in and just using them basically as they're intended to cover a lot of area right now. And what I like about this with the layers of collage underneath is that they also pick up that texture and accentuate that too. And of course, the joy of working in an altered book is that when it gets very thick and the pages get layered heavily, it's more and more difficult to get into the gutter and the spine. Now, I mentioned that some of these colors will move with water after they dry down. Most of them won't, but some of them will. And some of them also dry with almost a satiny sheen or a slight oxidation. And that's usually true of the dark blue colors, including this one right here. It makes them really pretty and visually interesting, but honestly a little bit difficult to film. What I find really exciting as somebody who, if you've been around this channel at all, you've seen me get a lot of mileage out of lifting acrylic paint through, especially this particular stencil, but through stencils in general. And I'm really excited about how well these paint sticks respond to lifting through stencils. At this point in the process, it's just a matter of putting down layer upon layer of these paint sticks to bring out the elements that I want and push back the elements that I don't want. And you can layer them pretty much infinitely. There's not really a point at which they stop going on over each other. You don't reach a point with these, like with colored pencils, where there's too much waxy buildup and they stop laying down on the page. And you also don't reach a point where they start lifting each other up off of the page like you do with some other media. So that makes it really easy to achieve painterly effects from just laying down layer after layer of these, especially if there's a difference in the opacity and sheerness of different colors. That said, this is a mixed media piece, and not all media go over paint sticks well, because they do achieve sort of a plasticky smoothness to them once they dry down. But these don't have to be your top layer the way you would have to make oil pastels or neocolors your top layer because they're so thick. You just have to be a little selective about what you use on top of them, which for me is not a problem because one of the things that works really great on top of these paint sticks is Poscas, which is another usual suspect in my supplies. Right here with the lavender and the minty green is probably my favorite stage in the process, when I can start to bring in other colors and achieve almost Monet style effects of working in different tints and hues, and then bringing in another layer of that gray to kind of mute them and push them back a little bit more and just achieve something really lovely and subtle. I'm working with two different Poscas here, starting with a brush pen that I love so much and I use all the time, and they dry out so fast and it makes me sad, and then a very fine point white Posca as well, and then I'm bringing in some Neocolor 2s, which also go on very well over the paint sticks, and they can be smudged really well on top of that layer too. Basically just going for different line weights and qualities of line, because if you do an entire piece with just the paint sticks, it all sort of has the same weight to it and the same texture, and it starts to look a little homogeneous and dull after a while. But with the Neocolors, I can achieve different depth, different texture, some finer detail, not super fine. Even Neocolors are more like crayons, they're not precision tools, but they do allow me to bring out a little more life in these areas that were only a couple of colors originally in the paint sticks. And just to accentuate that roiling smoke inside of the bottle, it reminds me a little of the movie Song of the Sea, with the emotions kept inside of jars, which is how I've felt about my feelings on many occasions. But that kind of ornate, decorative rendering is really what I'm going for in this piece specifically. decided I needed some words, so I brought out my interlocking rubber stamps. And I had a song stuck in my head, and I decided to use one of the lyrics from that song, which had sort of a call and response or echo element to the lyrics. And so I stamped each word twice, knowing that the second time would be more of a ghost image, it would be much fainter. And so I can get that same sort of echo vibe to the words themselves. And then I'm going to collage them down just like with my original layers, which those original layers turned out to not be very visible under 2 layers plus of the paint sticks, except of course where I lifted that up. And I always recommend, if you're going to do lifting of acrylic paints or paint sticks or even water-based media that will move much easier, that you always put a layer of matte gel down on your collage materials, if you didn't already, just to protect them and protect the page underneath, because otherwise it will pill very easily when you start to rub it with a wipe or a wet paper towel. Like I'm doing here, as I lift a little bit of this Neocolor off of the words. I want them to blend nicely into the background, so I'm smudging the edges. I don't want them to be completely obscured, but the ones in the lower right hand side are going to be more visible than the ones on the top that are meant to be sort of just floating out there, the same as the smoke. And of course, one of my finishing touches is always little dashed lines, stitch marks, topographic lines. You decide. These ones are meant to echo the smoke as well and just sort of waft along in the background. Gel pen works okay on top of the paint sticks. It does take a little bit of work, and I do come back later and reinforce those dashed lines with the Posca, which shows up much better on that background. Another technique I really enjoy with lettering is to not only stamp or write it, but also to stencil over that as well. And that also reinforces this sort of echo feel of this lyric. So I came in with a fine tip Posca through my stencil and then reinforced those lines with the brush tip Posca as well. Another little trail of dashes is going to connect those words. And I'm putting in one more dashed line that plays in and around the trail of smoke. Just sort of unites these all together. I love working in 3s for my dashes, and gives a little bit more depth as well. I have one more paint stick to bring into this piece, and this one is from M&G, and these paint sticks are basically dupes for the Tim Holtz line of distress crayons. The white is very, very sheer, and it actually seemed like it picked up some of that dark blue and almost soaked it into itself and gave this kind of ghostly appearance, which I really love for an outline and a highlight around the jar and around the smoke and around the word "you" in the lower right. Just gave it sort of a diaphanous feel. I really enjoyed giving this visualization a home in my art journal, and the media that I used helped lend a sense of almost childlike adventurousness. I hope you enjoyed this process as much as I did. Thanks so much for watching.